There's a flow to existence that most of us have completely forgotten how to follow. We've become so obsessed with controlling our lives, planning our futures, and forcing outcomes that we've lost touch with the natural intelligence that's always been guiding us. We treat life like a problem to be solved rather than a dance to be danced, like a machine to be operated rather than a river to be navigated. But what if there's a deeper wisdom at work in your life than your conscious mind could ever comprehend? What if there's an intelligence guiding your steps that's far more sophisticated than your personal will? What if what you call coincidences, intuitions, and lucky breaks are actually glimpses of a divine guidance system that never stopped working, even when you stopped paying attention to it? This is what Alan Watts understood so clearly through his synthesis of Eastern wisdom and Western insight. He saw that what many traditions call God is not some distant deity pulling strings from heaven, but the very intelligence of existence itself, the same intelligence that grows your hair, beats your heart, and heals your wounds without any conscious effort on your part. And this intelligence is not just managing your biological functions, it's orchestrating the entire symphony of your life. Most of us have been conditioned to think of God in very anthropomorphic terms, as a kind of cosmic person who watches over us, judges us, and occasionally intervenes in our affairs. But Watts saw that this image, while perhaps comforting, actually keeps us disconnected from the more intimate and immediate reality of divine guidance. It makes us think that God is somewhere else, doing something to us, rather than recognizing that God is the very process of our living, the very intelligence of our being. Think about how your body functions. You don't consciously direct your immune system to fight off infections. You don't manually regulate your blood pressure or consciously orchestrate the complex chemistry of digestion. You don't think your way through the intricate process of healing a cut or growing new cells. There's an intelligence at work in your body that's infinitely more sophisticated than your conscious mind, and it's working perfectly without any input from your ego. This same intelligence that runs your body is running your entire life. It's the intelligence that brought you to exactly where you are right now, through a series of events so complex and interconnected that your conscious mind could never have planned or predicted them. It's the intelligence that's been opening doors, creating opportunities, arranging meetings, and orchestrating circumstances in ways that always seem coincidental but are actually deeply purposeful. But here's the problem. We've been taught to distrust this intelligence. We've been conditioned to believe that if we're not consciously controlling something, it's out of control. We've learned to think that if we're not forcing outcomes through willpower and effort, nothing will happen. We've forgotten how to recognize divine guidance because we're so busy trying to guide ourselves. This creates what Watts called the tyranny of the ego, the exhausting and ultimately futile attempt to micromanage existence through personal will. We make endless plans, set countless goals, create elaborate strategies, and then wonder why life feels so difficult, so forced, so out of sync with our deeper nature. We're like someone trying to steer a river instead of learning to navigate it. The river is already flowing, the intelligence is already working, the guidance is already present, but we're so busy trying to create our own current that we can't feel the natural flow that's always been carrying us. We're so focused on where we think we should be going that we can't sense where life is actually trying to take us. This is why Watts emphasized the importance of what he called creative let go, not passive resignation, but active trust in the intelligence of existence. It's learning to distinguish between the effort that works with life's flow and the effort that works against it. It's developing the sensitivity to feel when you're swimming upstream and the wisdom to turn around and swim with the current instead. But how do you recognize this guidance when it appears? How do you distinguish between genuine divine intelligence and wishful thinking? How do you know when to follow your intuition and when to use your rational mind? How do you learn to trust a process that you can't see or control? The key is understanding that divine guidance rarely looks like what we expect it to look like. We imagine it should come as dramatic signs, clear voices, or obvious miracles. We think it should be perfectly rational, completely comfortable, and immediately understandable. But the intelligence of existence is far more subtle, more mysterious, and more creative than our expectations. Divine guidance often comes through what appears to be chance encounters, random opportunities, unexpected obstacles, or sudden insights. It shows up as the book that falls off the shelf at exactly the right moment, the conversation you overhear that contains exactly the information you need, the detour that leads you to exactly where you need to be. It manifests as the job you didn't get that opens the door to something better, the relationship that ends that prepares you for true love, the crisis that forces you to discover strengths you never knew you had. This guidance is always personal, always perfectly timed, and always designed to serve your highest good. But your highest good as understood by infinite intelligence, not necessarily as understood by your limited perspective. Sometimes what feels like guidance leads you toward pleasure and success. Sometimes it leads you toward challenge and growth. Sometimes it takes you exactly where you thought you wanted to go. Sometimes it takes you somewhere completely unexpected. The key is learning to recognize the quality of flow that accompanies genuine guidance. When you're following the true current of your life, things tend to unfold with a certain ease, even when they're difficult. Doors open, people appear, resources become available, obstacles resolve themselves. There's a sense of rightness, of being in sync with something larger than yourself. Conversely, when you're forcing things through ego will alone, there's usually a quality of struggle, resistance, and effortful pushing against the natural flow. Things feel forced, complicated, unnecessarily difficult. You find yourself constantly having to overcome obstacles, rather than finding that obstacles naturally resolve themselves. This doesn't mean that following divine guidance will always be easy or pleasant. Sometimes the intelligence of existence guides us through very challenging territory, because that's what we need for our growth and evolution. But there's a difference between the difficulty that comes from resistance to life's flow and the difficulty that comes from trusting life's flow, even when it leads through rough waters. Learning to sense this difference is one of the most important skills you can develop. It requires what's called spiritual sensitivity, the ability to feel the subtle currents beneath the surface waves of daily events. It means paying attention, not just to what's happening, but to how what's happening feels energetically, intuitively in your body and your deeper knowing. This sensitivity develops through practice. The more you pay attention to the guidance that's always present, the more obvious it becomes. The more you follow your genuine intuitions, the stronger they become. The more you trust the intelligence of existence, the more clearly you can perceive its communications. But this requires letting go of the need to understand everything intellectually before you trust it. Divine intelligence operates on levels far more complex and interconnected than rational thought can comprehend. If you wait until you can logically explain why something feels right before you follow it, you'll miss most of the guidance that's available to you. This is where faith comes in. Not blind belief in some external authority, but intimate trust in the intelligence that's been successfully managing your life all along. It's recognizing that the same wisdom that orchestrated your birth, guided your development, and brought you to this moment is still operating and still worthy of your trust. This faith is not naive or passive. It doesn't mean abandoning all planning, goal-setting, or rational thinking. It means holding these tools lightly, using them as instruments of the deeper intelligence rather than as substitutes for it. It means learning to plan while remaining open to better plans, to set goals while staying receptive to better goals, to think rationally while listening for wisdom that transcends rational thought. When you live this way, you discover that you can be incredibly effective without being controlling. You can work toward outcomes while not being attached to outcomes. You can have preferences while not being enslaved by preferences. You can use your will as a servant of divine will rather than as a competitor with it. This alignment creates what's called spontaneous right action, action that arises naturally from deep listening rather than forced effort. It's like the difference between a skilled musician playing from the heart and a novice musician mechanically following sheet music. Both might hit the right notes, but one is alive with natural expression while the other is constrained by artificial structure. When your actions flow from this deeper listening, they have a quality of effortlessness, even when they require great effort. There's no sense of strain or struggle, even when you're working very hard. There's a feeling of being carried by something larger than yourself, of being an instrument through which life expresses itself. This doesn't mean you become passive or that you stop taking initiative. It means your initiative comes from inspiration rather than desperation, from trust rather than fear, from abundance rather than scarcity. You act when action feels called for, rest when rest feels appropriate, speak when words want to come through you, and remain silent when silence is what's needed. You begin to live what's called the pathless path, following a guidance that has no fixed route because it's responsive to the ever-changing conditions of existence. You learn to navigate by inner compass rather than external map, to trust your indigenous wisdom rather than imported strategies, to follow the flow that's uniquely yours rather than the current that others think you should follow. This individual flow is not selfish or separate from the larger flow of existence. In fact, it's just the opposite. When you're truly following your authentic path, you're automatically serving the whole because you are part of the whole. When you're expressing your genuine nature, you're naturally contributing to the symphony of existence because your note is part of the cosmic music. This is one of the most beautiful paradoxes that Watts explored. The more completely you follow your individual path, the more you serve the universal good. The more authentically you express your unique nature, the more you contribute to the diversity and richness of the whole. The more you trust your personal guidance, the more you align with the cosmic intelligence. But this requires distinguishing between the voice of your authentic self and the voice of your conditioned ego. The ego often masquerades as intuition, fear often disguises itself as wisdom, and attachment often pretends to be guidance. Learning to tell the difference is crucial for following the true flow. Authentic guidance tends to feel spacious rather than contracted, trusting rather than fearful, connected rather than isolated. It usually invites you toward growth, expansion, and greater aliveness, even when that growth requires moving through difficulty. It feels aligned with love, truth, and service, even when the specific actions it suggests might be challenging or uncomfortable. Ego guidance, on the other hand, tends to feel tight, controlling, and based in fear. It's usually focused on protecting, acquiring, or maintaining, rather than growing, sharing, or serving. It seeks to avoid all discomfort, rather than moving skillfully through necessary discomfort toward greater aliveness. The more you practice listening for the difference, the clearer it becomes. You begin to recognize the signature of authentic guidance, the feeling tone of genuine intuition, the energetic quality of divine intelligence moving through you. You develop what Watts called spiritual discernment, the ability to distinguish between the many voices in your head and the one voice that's actually worth following. This voice, the voice of divine guidance, is not separate from you. It's not some external authority telling you what to do. It's the deepest part of yourself, the part that's connected to the intelligence of the whole, the part that knows things your rational mind hasn't figured out yet. It's your participation in the cosmic consciousness that's orchestrating all of existence. When you learn to listen to this voice and follow its guidance, your life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a collaboration, less like a problem you're trying to solve, and more like a dance you're learning to dance. Less like a burden you're carrying and more like a gift you're receiving and sharing. You start to see that what you thought were your personal efforts were actually the ways that divine intelligence was working through you. What you thought were your individual achievements were actually the fruits of cosmic collaboration. What you thought were your private struggles were actually your participation in the universal process of growth and evolution. This recognition brings tremendous relief and profound humility. Relief because you realize you don't have to figure everything out by yourself or control everything through personal will. Humility because you see that your individual efforts, while important, are part of something infinitely larger and more intelligent than your separate self. You become what Watts called a transparency for the divine. Not someone who has God, but someone through whom God expresses itself. Not someone who uses divine power, but someone who allows divine power to use them. Not someone who follows divine guidance, but someone who becomes divine guidance in action. This is the ultimate recognition that Watts pointed to. You are not separate from the intelligence that's guiding you. You are that intelligence, temporarily forgetting what you are, temporarily identifying with a small part of yourself, temporarily thinking you need to find guidance outside yourself when you are the very capacity for guidance itself. The flow you forgot to follow is not external to you. It's not something you need to get back to or reconnect with. You are the flow. You are the intelligence. You are the divine guidance that you've been seeking. You are God expressing itself as the particular pattern of consciousness that calls itself by your name. When you realize this, not as a concept, but as a lived reality, everything changes. You stop trying to follow divine guidance and start recognizing that you are divine guidance. You stop trying to align with God's will and start seeing that your deepest will is God's will. You stop trying to flow with life and start recognizing that you are life flowing as you. This doesn't make you grandiose or inflate your ego. If anything, it makes you more humble, more responsive, more surrendered to the mystery of existence. You realize that being divine doesn't mean being separate from or superior to everything else. It means being intimately connected to and in service of everything else. You become a conscious participant in the cosmic dance rather than someone trying to choreograph the dance from the sidelines. You become an aware instrument of the universal symphony rather than someone trying to play a solo in competition with the orchestra. You become a willing servant of love rather than someone trying to use love for personal advantage. And in this surrender, this recognition, this remembering of what you really are, you find the guidance you've been seeking, not as something coming from outside yourself, but as something emerging from the deepest part of yourself. Not as commands from a separate God, but as the natural expression of your own divine nature. The flow you forgot to follow is the flow of your own authentic being. The guidance you've been seeking is the wisdom of your own true self. The God who's been guiding you is the God that you are, temporarily playing at being human, temporarily forgetting your true nature, temporarily seeking outside yourself for what you've never actually lost. This is the ultimate message that flows through all of Watt's teaching. You are what you're looking for. You have what you think you need. You are where you think you need to go. The divine guidance you seek is the divine nature you are. And the flow you forgot to follow is the flow that you've never actually stopped being.